Number 1.
Working in a public library, I come across a lot of unusual people. Mostly it's just closed talkers, or the overly chatty, or the occasional explosive outburst, but nothing quite like what happened today. I was doing my usual routine, shelving books and shifting things around, when I'm startled by what sounds like a sort of strangled cough. It makes me jump, but I assume it's just a patron in one of the other aisles. I grab my next stack of books and walk down to the shelf. At this point, I'm pretty much in the corner of the library, though there is one shelf between me and the wall and a little walkway for safety purposes. I start putting the books away when out of the corner I see eyeballs. Yes, peering right at me. It's not someone looking for a book, and we happen to catch eyes. This guy is staring at me intently. It is, as you can imagine, completely unnerving. Now, one of the first things we're told when we're hired is that if we ever feel the slightest bit uncomfortable because of a patron, we are immediately to grab one of our co-workers, preferably someone senior to us. But I figured, hey, this is definitely weird, but I only have a few books left, so I might as well finish up. I keep putting items away and only have 1 or 2 left, when I notice, again in my peripheral vision, the guy has come over to my aisle. I glance his way and then proceed to have a little conversation with myself. It kind of looks like, no, it can't be. Wait, what? Oh shit, he totally is. That's right. Dude was standing in the aisle with his pants down, masturbating. Did I mention he was still staring right at my face? I froze for a moment, then turned and ran the 30 feet or so to the front desk. Somehow, between me leaving and coming back, the guy had disappeared, and we couldn't find him anywhere in the library. Pretty much all I could do was send out a description of him, though, to be honest, the only things I could recall in detail were his eyes and, his penis.
Number 2.
Here's a bit of a context. I work overnight at the library in the university where I live. It's a nice job where I almost don't have much work to do besides getting up every 30 minutes to push in chairs and clean up debris, etc. Anyway, early in the semester, when no students stay overnight at the library on Thursday nights, I had a strange experience. It was about 4 in the morning and I had already been around the library a couple of times and established, so I thought, that no one was in the building besides me and the guy at the security desk which is out of my view. Anyway, around this time, a very large man approaches the desk at which I work and starts to fiddle around with the staplers and tape which are left out for students' use. I ask him if I can help him with anything and he responds,
"I don't know. Is there anything you can help me with, you nigger?"
He starts laughing very loudly and quickly walks away from the desk. Of course, I'm offended and taken aback, so I go over to the security desk and explain the situation. The security fellow is dumbfounded. He says no one has come in for hours and we have each been around the library several times and seen nobody. We do a sweep of the library but find nobody. At this time, things are a bit uneasy, but I return to my desk. Behind my desk is a door to an empty office which is always locked. As I begin to get back to reading my book, I hear the slightest of noises behind me. Trying to sneak out of the office is the guy with the thin cord in his hand. I yell, "Oh shit," and he lets out an inhuman scream which chilled me to the bone. At this point, I'm up out of my chair and ready to go at it with this guy. But instead of coming after me, the guy just lays down on the floor, laughing and screaming and talking about killing niggers. Not cool. Anyway, security guy calls the police and they take the mentally deranged fellow away. He had a bunch of that wire on him along with some other interesting materials. A hammer, alarm clock, canteen full of piss, a decent amount of cheese and a brass knuckles. Police tell us later that he was MIA from a halfway house nearby and had a stolen keycard which he used to crash in the empty office for a couple of days.
Number 3.
First, some background. I'm a young woman in college. I just turned 22 this year, but at the time this story takes place, I was 15. I went to an early college high school, where the high school building was located on a college campus. We high schoolers were allowed free rein once we entered our junior year, since most of our classes would be over at the university. I spent most of my free time at the university library. It was always a fascinating and beautiful place for me, since I grew up in a tiny town that didn't even have a library until I entered junior high. The university library was 4 stories tall, with more books than even a bookworm like myself could ever hope to read. On the day this story took place, I was wandering the 2nd floor, which is where the CDs and DVDs were kept. It seemed so awesome to me that you could check out movies from the library, and I was searching for something I could watch with my family. As I looked, I was jolted out of my thoughts by someone behind me saying, "Hi there, sweetheart." I'm very uneasy around strangers to begin with. When I turned my head and saw a big man, probably in his 50s, smiling oddly at me, I immediately felt uncomfortable. Not wanting to be rude, I nodded and muttered a greeting. Trying to avoid any potential danger, I hurried a couple rows over. I guess I was hoping he would get the message that I wasn't interested in talking. The man followed, walking slowly. I saw his green shirt out of the corner of my eye as I pretended to browse the DVDs. To my alarm, he stepped very close and pressed his hand against the small of my back, looking over my shoulder at the shelf of DVDs. As I stood there, frozen, his hand began to move lower. I pulled away, shaking and on high alert now. I'd never understood why girls in horror movies don't do anything to fight their attackers until this moment. My fear and anger at this stranger overloaded my body with adrenaline, to the point where I could do nothing but stand there trembling and glaring. The man gave a quiet laugh and stepped back, waving as he walked down the row. "Have a nice day. Smile more." As soon as he was out of sight, down the next row, I booked it straight out of there. I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. I ran to the one place where I knew he couldn't follow me, the high school building. It has the best security of any of the buildings on campus. To avoid boring you with too many details, I ended up going right to my school counselor, who contacted the campus police. They questioned me, but I couldn't tell them much about the man. When I try to remember, all I could say is that he was wearing a black backpack and a green shirt. He was big with gray hair. Not much for the police to go on, but they told me to let them know immediately if he approached me again. Thankfully, I never saw him again after that day. Maybe the creep wised up and decided to stop following young girls around. This was by far one of the scariest things I've ever personally experienced.
Number 4.
This is by far the most scariest experience I've ever had in my life, and it wasn't even me being stalked. It was my ex-girlfriend 4 years ago. We were both 18 and just started a community college nearby. Our schedules were pretty similar, and we saw each other a lot. A month and a half into my school, my girlfriend starts to tell me that she's noticed a guy who's following her around campus, and she describes him as someone who looks like he works there, whatever that means. I asked her to recount some particular instances, and the only one she told me was that he has waited outside the library for her to finish her schoolwork for the past week, and on her way to her car, she always sees him sitting on the same bench, facing the direction she parks in. I was immediately a bit concerned, but it's college, everybody has a routine. Maybe his was to wait for someone outside the library and then go sit on a bench. I tell her that I'll go to the library during her study hour with her, and I'll do some of my work, and if the guy has ill intentions, he'll back off once he sees me with her. Now, it's important to note that I don't appear to be physically intimidating at all. I'm very slender and don't look muscular at all. I figured I probably wasn't going to scare somebody away, but it was worth a shot, and it comforted her at the time. We go to study, and we're sitting in front of the glass windows that separate the library from the hallway, and suddenly she nudges my notebook and whispers while she's looking down at her work. He's watching us. Look by the staircase doors. I look over and see a guy who's at most 35 years old. I figured there's no way he works there. He looks too young. I couldn't tell if he was in his late 20s or early 30s, but he looked simultaneously youthful, but experienced, if that makes any sense. Not somebody you'd be expecting to be stalking somebody or anything. He had a messenger bag with him, so I figured he might have been a student. Me, thinking quickly and wanting to see if this guy was really stalking my girlfriend, told her to get up and pretend to leave. I told her to leave the library and go downstairs towards the cafe. She listens and gets about 30 seconds down the hall before the guy starts following her. I immediately know something's up with this guy, and he's stalking my girlfriend. I rush out of the library, and he's only a few meters down the hallway, so I, as casually as possible, spark a conversation with this guy, pretending like I recognized him from somewhere. I asked him if I could walk with him, and he said sure. Him and I walked downstairs, and my girlfriend was almost never out of sight. He probably followed 15 meters behind her the whole way down to the cafeteria. He sits down at a table, and I pretend like I have to keep walking and just say the formalities, goodbye and nice meeting you and such. As soon as I get outside the door, I call my girlfriend and tell her to come out here. He was following her. She's really suspicious of me now because I was acting weird. I told her once she gets outside to come around the corner of the building so that he couldn't see where she walked to from inside and would attempt to come around here looking for her. Lo and behold, he comes out about a minute after her and turns into us. I'm standing there with her. He's looking at the two of us, and all I say is, why the actual fuck is he following my girlfriend? He played it off as a coincidence, but then upped his harassment. He texted her that night saying something like,
"Why the hell was your boyfriend so mouthy with me today?"
She didn't know who it was until she texted him, wrong number, and he replied with,
"No, it's not. On campus."
He started putting letters and gifts in the mailbox and slashed my tires, but stopped waiting outside the library. I hadn't seen him for weeks at this time, but he was completely terrorizing my girlfriend, and I was helpless about it this time, because he was invisible. He was hiding in plain sight apparently, but we never saw him. I was ready to seriously hurt this guy. The last night I saw the guy, I was staying at my girlfriend's house and her family was out late visiting some of her more distant family that lived about an hour away. It was just us in her house and we heard a window shatter. We locked her bedroom door and called the police, who instructed her to stay on the phone with them. We had no idea who it was. All that was clear was that somebody just broke into her house. I carry a knife almost everywhere with me, so I just got that out. It's a little knife I got as a bachelor gift from my boyfriend's wedding, but I was seriously ready to hurt somebody with it if they tried hurting me or my girlfriend at this point. We hear him walking around outside the door. Suddenly, he starts opening other doors in the house, but never closing them. He checks the pantry, the basement door, her parents' room, and the bathroom. By the time he gets to her bedroom door, we're well aware he's nearby. We find out it was him when he jiggled the door handle and realized it was locked. He started saying,
"Oh, what's wrong, honey? Are you scared now? I bet you wish that guy you call your boyfriend was here right now to protect your pretty self."
Then, he kicks the door so hard that the bottom panel cracks. It's not broken, just a giant crack in the wood, and she screams. I just yell out, "I'm here. You'll breathe your last breaths in this room if you come in. Get out of my house and leave us the fuck alone," in as intimidating a voice as I'm able to muster. I was so scared at this point. Luckily, just as I said that, the police came and arrested the guy. The window he smashed was the sliding door on her back porch. My girlfriend was severely shaken up, and I was just seriously angry and scared. But at the time, I had a ton of adrenaline running through me. I was ready to kill a person that night, and that mindset is something I will forever remember. Once you're actually in a situation where you might have to defend yourself and kill somebody, you really begin to understand how much animal instinct dictates your behavior. It's terrifying to even know I was capable of thinking that way.
Number 5.
I'm freaking out, Reddit. I've had a rough weekend, and I was told you guys could help me. Here's a little backstory. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with reading. I devoured every book I could get my hands on. In 3rd grade, I read at a high school level, so by the time I was 11 or 12, there weren't many books to advance for me. I read anything that piqued my interest. From ages 8 to 12, I spent countless hours at our town's public library. It's only 3 blocks from where my family lives, so my parents were cool with me going there basically any time. None of my friends liked to read, really, but I always felt drawn to the library anyway. The only downside was that the chairs were crazy uncomfortable, and people around were always loud. I just dealt with it, until I discovered the basement. About 5 months after my 8th birthday, I was starting to get bored with the contents of the library. It's a small town, so the selection wasn't as great as I would have liked. But on my way out one day, I saw a door in the far corner of the building that I hadn't noticed before. I opened it, and saw that it led to a rickety staircase. Let me describe this thing for you. First of all, it was basically pitch black, and the only light came from a little bulb on the ceiling. You know, the kind that you have to pull a string down to turn off and on. It was a spiral staircase with steep steps. And since the bulb was at the top of the flight, it got crazy dark near the bottom. It was dusty, creaky, musty, and every related adjective. The stairs were made of old wood, and the banister would give you splinters if you ran your hand on it. I don't know what possessed me to go down it the first time. I guess I was just bored of all the books I'd been rereading. Anyway, so when I got to the bottom of the staircase, there was a solid oak door, maroon, with a little bit of light shining out from the bottom and the edges. I opened it, and Mother of God, there was the most beautiful sight of my life. It was a basement to the library, but it was better than the library itself. First of all, there were more books than there were upstairs. There were chairs and couches that could not have been more comfortable for me, just how I liked them. There was a really distinct smell, a sort of natural, tangy sweetness, like a really great air freshener, and I couldn't imagine anything better than it. Best of all, there was nobody else down there. No whispers to distract me, no coughs, sniffles, or sneezes. I could lose myself in books down there. Oh, and speaking of the books, they were so much better than the ones upstairs. I swear, I never looked for a book down there that I couldn't find. I went back almost every day. For the next 3 years, I was never bored down there. Until May 19th, 2005. It was my 12th birthday. My family was going to have a party for me. Cousins, aunts, uncles. Around 7 people. So I had a few hours after school to kill. As per usual, I went to the basement of my public library, and as usual, I was the only one there. For a couple hours I lost myself in a book, but then the sweet smell around me started turning sour. It happened so subtly, I wouldn't even have noticed it, if not for a sneeze that prompted me to take in a big gasp of air. It was honestly almost like the smell hadn't changed, just that I liked it less all of a sudden. I really don't know how to describe that. Anyway, I started getting restless reading my book. I put it down next to me on the couch, and just stared around at my surroundings, then I noticed a book on one of the shelves that seemed different than the others. Hoping a new book would help ease my restlessness, I walked over to it and pulled it from the shelf. It was larger than most of the other books down there, and bound in leather that was the same shade of maroon as the door. On the cover was one word, in bold, silver, typewriter font. Apprentice. As I read that word, the sick smell seemed to grow stronger. Rather than being interested in my new find, I began to feel even more anxious. For the first time in 3 years, I did not want to be in that basement. But my curiosity won out, and I opened the book. There, on the inside cover, were the last words I ever read in that basement. An elegant, calligraphic cursive spelled out the last thing I expected to see. My name. I ran like hell. I can't quite describe the feeling that came over me when I read that. I feel silly using the word evil, so I'll go with panic. I felt a desperate need to get out of that room. I bounded through the maroon oak doorframe, took the rickety stairs 2 at a time, and got the hell out of there. I never went back. The weird thing, as if this story isn't weird already, was that for the next couple of weeks, I'd randomly smell that same sickly sweet smell that the basement had on that last day. It wouldn't last more than a couple of minutes, but it probably happened about 10 times before it stopped altogether. Needless to say, I avoided the library like the plague after that. Even walking or driving on that road gave me anxiety. So now, I'm 22 years old, and here's where the story gets messy. I go to a local community college. Funny how once you stop reading or caring about school, you can't get into any of the colleges you want. Anyway, it's about 15 minutes from my house. I was in a government class, and we were assigned a group paper. 3 of my classmates and I met to decide where would be a nice, quiet place for us to do our project. And one of them, a high school classmate of mine, suggests, "How about the public library?" He then goes on to describe how it's a quiet place and hardly anyone goes there, and that it's open really late because the librarian has nothing better to do. Of course, I'm freaking out a little bit, but there's nothing I could say that wouldn't make me seem like a complete nut. So I agreed. I needed to face my demons anyway, right? I determined that I wouldn't be afraid of this building anymore. Kids experience weird stuff sometimes. I really couldn't be sure I wasn't just an imaginative child, and it was now time for me to grow up and be a man. All that jazz. So last Thursday, our group met at the library. I actually felt really good about being there. It wasn't nearly as loud as I remembered, and it was a solid place for us to do our project, but I looked around for the door to the basement and couldn't find it. I must have forgotten where it was, right? It had been a while after all. I wanted to go down, to really prove to myself that my fears were gone forever. So I approached the librarian, who's worked there since my parents were kids, and said, "Hey, where's the door to the basement?" She looked at me really, really weird, and this, I shit you not, is what she said to me, word for word. "Basement? We don't have a basement. We've never had a basement. In fact, city ordinances prohibit all buildings in this area from having a basement." Then she went about her business. So obviously I'm freaking out at this point, and I get the hell out of there. But walking back out to my car, I can smell it. That same sickly sweet smell from that day in the library basement. The basement that supposedly never existed. What the hell, Reddit? What am I supposed to make of that? Anyway, I've smelled it like 6 or 7 times since Thursday, and it always goes away within a couple of minutes. What the hell is it? And I swear to God that other than my bed and school, I spent more time in that basement than anywhere else during those years of my life. I'd swear that place exists with a gun to my head, and apparently it's just gone. I checked out what the library told me, and yeah, city ordinances prohibit basements around that area. Apparently the ground is pretty unstable. Anyway, what is going on with me, guys? Don't be afraid to tell me if I'm crazy, because I'm willing to accept that as a possibility at this point. What's up with the Apprentice book? Now that I'm thinking about it, I literally don't remember seeing anybody else in that basement, which would make sense if, according to the librarian, it doesn't exist. I just need to know what's happening because I can't think of anything else now. Oh God, I'm smelling it again. Help me. Greetings, friends. Mr. X Dreams here. I'd like to thank my good friend, the Grim Reader, for inviting me over to his channel for this special collaboration. If you enjoy the sound of my voice, you're welcome to pay a visit over at my channel, Mr. X Dreams. There, I regale you with tales of my own nightmares and dreams, along with true, terrifying paranormal experiences of not only myself, but also my subscribers. If you have any personal experiences with the paranormal, or the otherwise unexplainable, I implore you to reach out into the darkness. Find me, and let me tell your story. I'm Mr. X. Good night.